Today we're going to learn something brand new. We're going to learn about the complex sentence. Now that you've had time understanding and practicing putting clauses together with the compound sentence, and you've learned about the dependent clause, what if we take a dependent clause and an independent clause and put them together to form a sentence? We have a complex sentence. The complex sentence is one of the best sentences that you can add to your writing as far as sentence structure, because it's not simple. It's not just a subject and a predicate. Has a dependent clause, which makes it much more interesting. But remember, that dependent clause is dependent on the independent clause to make sense. So a complex sentence has one dependent clause and one independent clause. Now, the independent clause can be at the beginning and the dependent clause can be at the end. If that's the case, we do not put any punctuation between the two because the subordinator divides the two. If the dependent clause comes first, we place a comma at the end of the dependent clause and then write the independent clause. Let's look at it, just to make sure you understand it. So here's the sentence. I bought a donut after Jason shared his with me. So the first clause, I bought a donut. That is an independent clause because I have a subject and a predicate. It's a complete thought. It makes sense. Here's my subordinator that begins this dependent clause. I have a subject and a predicate, so I know this is a dependent clause. It begins with a subordinator, has a subject and a predicate after Jason shared his with me. No punctuation between the two. So the format ICDC looks just like that. Independent clause followed by a dependent clause. But if the dependent clause comes first, we put a comma between the two. And the comma really works well there because when you read it, you feel like you need to pause. Let me show you what I mean. After Jason shared his donut with me, I bought one. So here we have a dependent clause. We have the subordinator that starts, and we know that it has a subject and a predicate because we can see it, a subject and a verb, Now we're ready to look at this comma here. Let me switch to this side. After Jason shared his donut with me, comma, I bought one. So we have the independent clause here and the dependent clause, which fits this structure. And we have to separate them with a comma. Let's look at the next sentence. Crystal gave me an extra one because she was full. Crystal gave me an extra one is an independent clause. Because is my subordinator, but do I have a subject and a verb? She was full. Yes. That means it's a dependent clause because it contains a subject and a verb and the subordinator. No comma. Just like that. So that's the complex sentence. Now, the complex sentence is great. So I want you to practice learning how to find those clauses in those kinds of sentences and making them. And then when we get to the composition section and we're revising for sentence structure, you're going to have 2 new sentence structures to make your communication more effective. Because when we write, we use a variety of sentence structures, and that's going to help you with it. So the independent clause followed by the dependent clause, or flipping it around, dependent clause, comma, independent clause, is the complex sentence. The compound sentence that you learned about earlier, 2 independent clauses put together by a common and coordinating conjunction, and the simple sentence. Now you have 3 different types of sentences, but the complex has 2 different variations, so you actually have 4 different types of sentences to create a variety of sentence structures when you're writing. But let's practice the complex sentence first, and then we'll move on. I have a portion of my narrative on the board, and I'm going to show you how to revise for word choice. Now, you're getting pretty good at this because you've done it several times, but I still like to show you because there are so many different things that we do with word choice. For example, in a narrative, I'm probably going to use some figurative language because figurative language like really makes things come alive. I need to use vivid language because I want my reader to see what happened and feel it and experience it, not just read about it. So, I like to read it out loud, and I think you should too. As you revise, read everything out loud and make your changes. So, just as he reached the cellar door, the wind howled and tugged at his shirt. He gripped the handle and yanked with all his might. Before he could tighten his grip, the roaring wind tugged at his shirt and he lost his grip. I have to change this because it sounds, let's say that it tugged at his body. Yeah, instead of his shirt, like trying to suck him up. And he lost his grip. What we just said something about here, he before he could tighten his grip, the roaring wind tugged at his body, and let's do that. Connect it. And his fingers slipped. Period. Take that out. Take out the and. Make this capital W. Without warning, Jake was sucked up into what kind of tornado? Vicious. Or I could say furious. I'll have to decide when I write my final copy. Now notice I went ahead and indented here because I like to shift with a new paragraph, shift that here's something new that's going to happen. Screaming and swirling and twirling. A little bit of rhyme there. Jake was scared. Oh, scared. That's an overused word. How about terrified? Jake was terrified. He saw beds and trees flying through the air. He saw them? How about I just make them fly through the air? Let's take out he saw and say beds and trees flew through the air. How is that? That's excellent. Beds and trees flew through the air, while the wind flung him this way and that way. He realized he would die. Slowly, Jake lost consciousness, and before he could scream one last time, the roaring wind faded into a solid hum. Ee, ee, ee. Soon his body went limp. He was tossed in the wind. Oh, let's change this to add some figurative language. His body went limp, and his body went limp. How could I put that into figurative language? The wind, his body went limp. Oh, and he was tossed in the wind like a rag doll. Ooh, simile. Yes, yes, yes. Now, that's what it looks like to revise for word choice. And that's what I want you to do now. Think about, can I add some figurative language here? How can I make this composition come alive? And not just say he saw beds and trees, but let's make the beds and trees fly through the air. We want our reader to experience it completely. Now it's your turn. Now we're ready to organize our thoughts. Remember that the organization stage of writing, or the actual step of writing when we organize, is the focus is to really try to provide quality content rather than focusing on writing sentences. So it's the core of what I want to say. And so with persuasive writing, we need to use strong language with powerful details and powerful examples, because we're trying to convince someone of something, to do something or to agree with us. And so we want to open our letter with a hook. Now, A hook is a way to grab your reader's attention. And since I know that parents really like for kids to be responsible, I would say that that would be a great way for you to open your paragraph, or your personal letter. That would be a great way to hook your reader, is to talk about being responsible. Maybe ask a question. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that's a great way to open it. But first, let me explain to you before we actually get into the organizing. My job is to write a personal letter to my kids, convincing them to get something for me. So I think that would be, a great opportunity to also hook my kids and hook my audience. So that's what we're going to do now. Hook. So I can't talk about responsibility because my kids already think I'm responsible, but that might be a good one for you. So how could I hook my kids? How would I hook my own children? I'm going to write the word Andy's frozen custard, because that is the way I'm going to get my kids to listen to me in this letter. Now, what is my argument? What is it that I want them to get for me? Well, I did my brainstorming activity and I tried to think of what would I like for my kids to get for me? Well, I didn't really have something that I said that I wanted them to get for me, but it was something that they could do for me. And that is, my argument is spend 1 hour with me, with a catch. Cell phone free. And I even made a rhyme. So this would be, I have adult children, this would be my request. So this will be a fun letter to write. So that's my argument. That's the thesis. That is what I'm trying to convince my audience about. It's the whole purpose of this letter. It's the main thing. In an essay, that's called a thesis. In a paragraph, it's called the main idea, or the topic sentence, or the opening sentence. So now I'm going to list my reasons, and the reasons are the why. Why do I want you to spend an hour with me cell phone free? Well, quality time. That's why. And what is the other reason that I want you to spend 1 hour with me cell phone free? Fun. Those are the 2 reasons. Now, you have to give 3 reasons. Lucky for me, I only have space for 2. But you have to do 3. So you're going to have to think about, well, what other reason? Be very convincing. Now I'm going to list my examples. So what about this quality time? Give me an example of quality time that supports that why they should spend an hour with me cell phone free. Well, we can talk about important things without distraction. And listen. Oh, I just thought of something. And I should put, and it's fun. All of those equal quality time. Take away this fun and put learn.